back to the automotive art now.
Yeah.
What has been your most popular car, number one? Number two, we talked about local, but cars are international, worldwide.
Right.
Do you sell a lot of your art to worldwide people? What's been the most popular?
It's really interesting. I don't really sell my car pieces to car guys. I find that car guys, oh boy, I got to be careful here because I don't want to insult anybody. But here's what I get from car guys. I got a beautiful piece of a 1954 MG TF Roadster, and it's bright red. And the car guy comes to me and he says, "Wow, I love that. If that was blue like mine, I'd buy it." Okay? But then I have the guy who's not a car guy, and he looks at it and he says, "Wow, I love that car. I want to buy it." He sees the car as art, not as his personal car. Now, all the cars that I do, I have some personal touch with them. They were either cars that I owned, or cars that were owned by friends of mine, or cars that I wish that I could own but had no hope of doing it. And that way I get to own them because I create them from the ground up, in an image that appeals to me personally.
Which actual car has been the best seller? Which is the most popular?
Gee, there's so many of them that have been really successful. And I do cars that sit in little restaurants that people know, and so or at gas stations. I rarely do just a car for a car, although I'm not above doing that at all. But my '59 Cadillacs have been incredibly popular. The '57 Chevys, the '65 Corvette Stingrays. Those are three models. It seems like every time I do one, people just grab them up. The Corvettes, the Stingrays, the split window coupes, very, very popular. And people come and they say, I always love that car, and they buy it. And very rarely do I sell, one of those to somebody that actually owns one. So that's always interesting to me.
I've seen some of your kind of specific people paid you to do a specific car, maybe their family with a car,
right.
Maybe other things too, businesses and that sort of thing. How much of that how much of that accounts for all of your work?
Well, these days more and more I'm getting more people approach me and ask me to do specific things for them. And I'll give you an example. I'm working on a job right now which is really kind of cool. A lady approached me and she said her dad was the manager of a Chrysler dealership in Blackstone, Virginia back in the 50s and 60s. And she gave me a black and white picture of the dealership, and she wanted me to do the dealership, but she wanted me to put a Chrysler of the era parked in front of the dealership, and that would be very prominent in the foreground. And I said, well, what kind of a Chrysler? And she said, well, I don't really know. What would you like to do? And I'm immediately thinking, okay, 1961 Chrysler Imperial, which was just a really outrageous car with huge fins and these what they call bomb sight taillights that were fantastic. And she's left it pretty much open to me. But what I've got to do now, because I won't work from any photos except my own original photos, I've got to find somebody who owns that car. And then I've got to set up a time that I can go and photograph the car and then create the piece. And that's what's fun. A lot of time people have approached me. I did a piece for some folks whose granddad owned a DeSoto dealership down in Norfolk. And it was a real job finding a DeSoto. They specifically wanted a 1958 or 59 DeSoto. And so I went to all the car for sale sites like Hemmings and looked for the car for sale locally. And when I found one, I called the people and told them what I was doing and asked them if I could come over and photograph it. And they were very gracious and allowed me to come over and photograph the car. Of course, I gave them a copy of the print too, which made it real special for them. This started as a commission piece. I was invited to come down and photograph a car show in Amelia Island, Florida. And the idea was that I would photograph the best in show and then create artwork that would be used for the poster for the next year. And this car was the best in show. It's a Lincoln Mark I. And the owner told me that the car was originally owned by Edsel Ford's wife and was in the Dearborn Museum. 60,000 original miles. He bought the car from the museum and did a complete nut and bolt restoration. It so happened that the car show was sponsored by Volkswagen of America, so they had a Volkswagen division, and this Combi won the best in show for the Volkswagen division. So I put the Volkswagen and the Lincoln together in the same artwork, which is kind of an interesting combination, but it worked out pretty good, and people love the piece. This is a 1956 Chevy parked in front of Carl's Drive-In in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Now, Carl's opened up in 1956, so I did this as an anniversary piece to commemorate their founding. And they have the best ice cream anywhere. Certainly worth a drive to Fredericksburg. And I thought the Chevy parked in front looked very appropriate. This is a 66 Mustang, and if you look very carefully, you'll see that it's parked next to another Mustang, and you'll see that the yellow Mustang is reflected in the side of the red Mustang. And I saw this at a car show, and I just really liked the color and the way the reflection played out on the side of the car, so I did this piece. Now, I met the owner of this Jaguar drop head coupe at a polo match, and he told me that his dad had bought this car in England, brand new, off the showroom floor in 1957, and he was a GI at the time, stationed there, and he drove it around Europe and then had it packed into a shipping container and shipped back to the States. And he used it very, very sparingly and left it to his son. When his son got the car, it had 60,000 original miles on it, and he was being a good steward and just driving it very sparingly, but the car was like brand new. It was really a gorgeous car, and I took this piece and chose to do it almost as an abstract, getting in real close on it and doing this piece. This is one of the most popular pieces of the cars that I do. People love this piece because it goes with just about everything. This is an interesting story because my neighbor owns this car, and he heard a rumor that there was a 58 Chevrolet for sale, and he went to investigate, found out it was a 58 Corvette, and the owner had passed away, and the owner's widow had the car for sale. And he said, how much do you want for the car? And she said, $4,000. And he said, ma'am, if I gave you $4,000 for this car, I would never be able to sleep at night. And this is what the car is worth, and I want to give you fair value. And so he did. He drove the car for several years. It was a 40,000 mile original. And then he took it apart and did a nut and bolt restoration on it. It took him 3 years. And now he drives it anytime that the sun is shining, and I see it in the neighborhood frequently, and it's a beautiful car. He has a 3-car garage, the only one in town, and so I photographed it with fall foliage in front of his 3-car garage.
Does he have anything else of note?
You know, he doesn't. This is the only car he had. He actually had a, believe it or not, he had a 67 Stingray, which he sold to buy this car. Because he'd always wanted a 58 or a 59.